Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for a special Fruition Partners and ServiceNow webinar entitled Platform Analytics for the Entire Enterprise. Today's webinar is scheduled for 45 minutes, but we hope it feels more like 15 minutes since we're expecting the content to be that good. I do want to point out that the webinar is being recorded, so if you have to jump off early for any reason, you'll be able to watch a recording of the webinar, which will be available on our website sometime next week. We're very excited to be doing a joint webinar with ServiceNow today. We have two amazing presenters lined up, Chris Myers from Fruition Partners and Barry Brooks from ServiceNow. Both have an abundance of experience when it comes to ServiceNow and, more importantly, performance analytics. So Chris, if I could just get you to say a quick hi to the audience.
Hi everybody, I'm Chris Myers, and I will be presenting our methodologies and how to turn on incident management trial version.
Thanks. And then Barry, if I could just get you to do the same.
And I'm Barry Brooks from ServiceNow. I'm going to be running you through a little bit of the methodology and then also a live demo.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So again, this webinar is only 45 minutes today, and we have a lot to cover, including a live demo. So we may not have time for a dedicated Q&A at the end. However, we still encourage you to ask questions as they come to mind, whether via the GoToMeeting panel or the Twitter hashtag up on the screen there. We'll definitely be sure to follow up with you personally after the webinar. Also worth noting that we have two poll questions today. Polls will be launched on the slides that have the poll icon in the bottom right corner, so be on the lookout for those. The results will be shared in real time. So here's a quick look at today's agenda, just so you have an idea of what we plan to cover today. The highlight is certainly Barry's live demo, so you'll definitely want to stick around for that. And as you can see, it looks like we actually have our first poll question right out of the gate. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that to everybody right now. So our first poll question is, are you currently on ServiceNow's Eureka release? And the available options for response are yes, no, and I don't know. So we'll give everybody about 10 more seconds to vote, and then we'll share the results and pass it off to Barry. So we'll close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So poll is closed, and we will share the results. So again, the question was, are you currently on ServiceNow's Eureka release? 35% said yes, 59% said no, and 6% said I don't know. So I'll leave that up on the screen just for a second. And it's worth noting that 85% of attendees voted, so pretty significant results. So I appreciate everybody participating. I'm going to go ahead and hide those results and then pass it off to Barry to kick things off. So Barry, I'm going to make you presenter.
Very good. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Barry.
So again, I'm Barry Brooks. I've been with ServiceNow for about 6 years now at this point. And really, you know, part of my role is as a specialist is around kind of getting my hands wrapped around some of the new products. One of them is performance analytics. And really, when we picked up performance analytics, you know, going on about a year now, you know, we kind of thought this was going to be some kind of, you know, addition to reporting. We thought it was going to be some type of reporting on steroids, and it really isn't. It's a very different type of solution. You ask very different questions of it, and you get very different types of answers. And so when we think about, you know, what is reporting, you know, reporting for us is taking all of that base data, that incident, problem, change data, and getting some meaningful reports out of it. You know, these are all the operational reports that you guys are getting today. It's very bottom up. And then taking all of those reports and then really getting some more analysis from them. So that it's continuing to move to the right. You'll hear me talk about that. Whenever I'm asking folks or I'm challenging folks about what types of things they're trying to get out of performance analytics, I'm always saying, let's move it to the right. So you're asking different types of questions. Performance analytics is very much from the top down. It relies, though, on the base reporting that you have inside of ServiceNow, which is good because all of that data is available to you inside of the instance. So whether you're just running incident, problem, and change, or you're running, some other type of custom app, all of that data is available. And for me, one of the analogies that really makes it stick is this one. I'm a car guy, so everything is kind of car related in my world. But when you're driving from point A to point B, you use your dashboard to help you get there. The dashboard tells you all that stuff you need. How much fuel do I have? And, what are my RPMs doing? What gear am I in? But if I come around the corner and realize I'm stuck in a traffic jam, there's not a whole lot that I can do there. And of course, if I have some type of GPS or sat nav, that's where I'm going to get maybe some additional routes. And that's very much the same way in your organization when we talk about reporting versus analytics. So those operational reports are what you use every day. That's all that stuff that's on the dashboard. This is my open records, and these are my SLAs, and this is what's going to breach in the next 24 hours. So I use all that to help me get from point A to point B. And then, of course, there's that end of the month reports that you're generating. There's not a whole lot you can do with that data. You're done, right? You can't affect any type of change. If you're in a traffic jam, you're going to be in there. But what PA can do is it can provide you with some leading indicators that can allow you to make changes. So it'll allow you to adjust things before the end of the month. So before we get stuck in that traffic jam. And there's some major differentiators between these types of solutions. They're kind of listed out here. Operational stuff, very real time. Again, it's very bottom up. It's all the stuff that you use day in and day out. If you go down to the very bottom and you talk about PA, that's more of the trending data. So that's, how are we doing month over month? Is there a cycle in between? Is there a cycle from the second to the third week? And then, of course, you have all of that monthly reporting, whether you do it inside of, some other type of tool or it's a BI tool. The thing with the BI tools and that type of report is when you dump that data out, it's old. You lose the link back to the records, and also it tends to be very cumbersome. It's a big box solution. You have a dedicated team that normally tends to run those out. And let's face it, IT is normally at the bottom of the list when it comes to getting new reports in the BI solution. And when I think about the two main types of reports, this really is what makes sense for me. It's this leading versus lagging. And so a lagging indicator is all the stuff that we build every day. That's the what's going on, right now. I want to see how well did we do at the end of the month, but there's no way to affect any of the changes, for those gauges. They're old. That's the 30-day reports. Where the leading reports allow you to still affect some type of change. So an example that we use, and this is a real-world example. So if we come in and we drop in performance analytics in a POV environment, we look at things. And a lot of times what you'll see is if you take one of your long SLAs, like a priority 3 or a 5 or something that's maybe 72 hours, if you look at, on average, all of those incidents or tickets that are breached, they all kind of look the same. You'll end up with a signature. And the signature may be things like, they don't get touched for the first 12 hours, or they get misrouted more than, 2 or 3 times. And so what you can do is then take that, put it into performance analytics to create a leading indicator. So now think about a dashboard where you still have the operational stuff. Show me my stuff right now, my ticket queue. But also on the right-hand side, what if you could look at a leading indicator that says, show me all of the records that match maybe this signature? Because again, it gives you an opportunity to then affect some of the changes for those records before they breach out. So there's some major differences between the two. One is very easy to measure, one is very hard to control, and the other is just absolutely vice versa. So PA for us is exactly in the business management stack. The BM stack for us is a place where we've organize these in such a way so that, when we're building tool sets and we're building functional pieces and use cases, they fit together solidly. And PA sits right into that business management stack. But also it's used for, for every part of the tool itself. So again, regardless of whether you have incident problem or you're running change or you're running some new custom application, every single bit of that is available to you inside of Performance Analytics. It looks very different. So you'll have a tendency to drop in PA and just kind of start building new types of operational reports. And you really have an opportunity to think about, well, what is it that we want to use PA for? Are we trying to answer some types of questions? And so you're going to have a little different view of it. So here we have more reporting-based gauges on the left and more performance analytics on the right. They tend to look very, very different. Also, who uses them is different. So again, think about reporting as a bottom-up, more operational. Think about performance analytics from a top-down. And of course, there's going to be overlap in between the two, but for the most part, you're trying to answer questions with PA. For us, everything fits nicely into the service model. If you've been a ServiceNow customer for a while, you're starting to see this. These are the 5 pillars for the service model. And while you certainly don't have to have a service model to provide a service, you absolutely have to have one when you want to start to measure it. And so from ServiceNow, you're going to start to see how our product aligns with each of these 5 pillars. But the last 2 are what we're going to talk about today and what you're going to see. And when you think about service assurance and service analytics, those are both squarely in reporting and analytics. So at this point, I'm going to switch over, and I want to show you a little bit of the product here. And this is one of the instances of ServiceNow. This is my instance, obviously. This is the PA version. And so what we have is, first off, is you have the same role and permission sets that the entire solution already has. So you use the same ACLs, your groups, and you have separate domains, and they have access to only certain types of data. That works the same way in this solution as well. You also have the capability to have different dashboards and different navigator bars. So if you want to have things like incident problem change, if you want to have things like CIO or an executive level dashboard, you can do all that. You can also have tabs across the top. You guys have capability to configure every bit of this. So if you have the rights to it, if you have certain roles, of course we added another 8 or 10 roles to it, you can then come in and tweak these, create new tabs. These are just visualizations, though, for the gauges. So inside of ServiceNow, you're familiar with gauges. The gauge is a different type of report or a widget or a scrolling box. So these all work the exact same way. You can mix and match these. You can add reporting gauges on top of these. You can put PA on top of your other dashboards. But these visualizations are what you control, and they all come from the indicators. So a very, very basic indicator is the number of new or open incidents. You're seeing these basic indicators at the top of the screen. This is a breakdown or a list view of it, where you're just seeing the indicators and then the raw data underneath it. This is configurable by you. It's all interactive. So if I move my mouse and I hover over it, I can see what the date or what the values were for a specific time and frame. If I select into it, it opens up the gauge for me. I could also do things like show me the last 7 or 8 different time slices, and maybe I want that to be at the end of every month. And I want to have things like the scores and the changes. This is a different type of visualization around the time series. So right off the bat, you're seeing we have the capability to do all of the trending that we just didn't have the capability for with reports. With reporting, you could say, show me all of maybe the incidents and break them down by category and then stack them by something else. But it was really whatever you identified in the time series. With now this data, goes back to as much data as you have inside of ServiceNow. You can also overlay multiple gauges on top of each other. So just in this one visualization, we have open incidents. I said I also want to see the number of open incidents not updated in the last 30 days, and maybe my current staff member views and something else here. And it's all interactive. So if I want to take this data off, I can have this resort. If I drill down into this, shows me exactly what that was for the day. And if I click down into it, now I get the detail for this. And these all look the same. So once you see one of these, you'll know how to use every other gauge and widget and visualization inside of the tool. From here, you get information like what is the base number. So here we have 495, and it shows me the change for a specific date. I can, again, use my mouse and find out what the date was for a different date range. I also have access to a ton of different aggregates. So just by building one indicator that says, give me the number of open incidents, for example, and captures that data every single night, now the tool can build those out for me, give me different aggregates. You know, I like a 30-day report. It's kind of what we're used to inside of IT, but a much more useful report is the 7-day report. You know, this is a moving average. There's lots of things that could certainly have happened at the beginning of the month, where a 7-day is real. What's going on right now? You know, if you have a 72-hour escalation period, a 7-day moving average is great because it shows you, what medicine you're going to be taking in the next couple of days. You also have access to those change this. So right now I've said in that primary gauge, show me a month's worth of data, and that's what's displayed here. But I could always go back and say, well, show me everything that I've collected so far. You could pick a specific date range in here. You can also change the visualization. So right now this is a line chart, but I certainly could say I'd rather have it as an area. And then maybe I want to add some other date or add some other content to it. So I could say, I'd like to have a target for this. I'd like to have a threshold. A target is pretty self-explanatory, but a threshold is interesting because you could say, well, even though I have a target, I want to make sure that none of these KPIs go out of the threshold. And the thresholds maybe could be 25% above or below that target. And then you can set up a rule that says, hey, anytime you go outside of that threshold or you go within 5% of breaching it or a new high or a new low, any of those things, start to do some proactive notifications so that instead of always having to have the dashboards open, I can have maybe just 2 or 3 that I look at every day, and then the rest just send me a notification if they start to go out of whack. So thresholds are interesting. Trend lines, confidence bands. Trend line is very, very nice, especially when you have a ton of data. Sometimes it's hard to see the actual trend through some of the cycles. The confidence bands are interesting too because the confidence bands are that's the Six Sigma approach. That's the UCL and UCL. So this is how well is my process doing? Are we out of whack here with it? This example is kind of all over the board. Also, things you can do are add the labels. Labels don't make a lot of sense for this one, but comments maybe do. So it's nice to be able to identify, right in here, as the data is coming in, events that happened or process changes. Anything that's going to impact the gauge, and I want to have notification. I want people to be able to see, hey, we had a spike here because this event happened or because something else changed. Down here at the bottom, you can see all the different comments that have come into this thing. If I select the breakdown tab at the top, now I start to get additional capability to do things like drill down into the data. So a breakdown for us is any data source that you have, anything else that's in the record. So these are the very common ones that you would normally see. But you could have other things. You could have dynamic breakdown. So for example, let's say you have a ton of assignment groups. And you don't want to break down by assignment group. Maybe you want to take the assignment groups and kind of walk back to the data and find a business unit or a cost center or a geographic location. Maybe that makes more sense for you. Those all could be breakdowns. And there's no limit to the number of those that you can have. So at this point, if I'm looking at the priority, and I could, of course, pick, I only want a specific priority to see, but I'm still interactive. So I could look at this data. I'm looking at more like a scorecard view, but again, I could go back to like the columns and total view of this thing. And so I'm just visualizing, I'm just changing it all on the fly. This, by the way, could be the visualization you put on the home page. So just by having this one indicator, number of open incidents, you could see I could have a dozen different types of visualizations for it based on who wants to see the data, what are they using it for, and other things. And then finally, and this is one of the, again, another of the big differentiators, is that you can still go always back to the data. So with other types of tools, you know, and there's hundreds of them out there, whether you go from a big BI tool down to a smaller reporting tool, you know, those tools, you export the data out of ServiceNow and you dump it into their product. You use their visualizations, you know, but you lose the access to drill back to the ticket. And with this, we sit on top of the platform. That's always been the benefit to ServiceNow. Single platform, single source of record. So I can always go and say, what is that data? Where are these records that are making up this gauge that I'm looking at? Okay. So we were talking about some of the dashboards. We looked at some of those that are in here. Let me give you just a couple of examples that I think are interesting to you. So here is one where we're looking at basic indicators, open incidents maybe by category, maybe by first call resolution. There's no limit to the number of stuff that you can build out in here. But I want to show you one of these. So here's an example of a top-down approach that came from a customer. The customer said to us, you know, we want to try. We have an initiative where we want to reduce the number of backlog by 50% before a major release of a new application. So in this case, they had a tool. The tool is kind of like an SAP. It was a very, very large tool. And when they released the new version, their call volumes would always go through the roof, and they would end up getting buried. So they said, we want to clean out the backlog at least by half within a certain time frame. How many people would we need to do that? So again, a very top-down approach. It's an initiative that performance analytics can then handle. And so I took their formulas and I put them into my demo, and this is what we're seeing. So right off the bat, in the upper left-hand corner, we're looking at the number of IT staff that we have. So I have 25 folks in my demo. And then down below, what we're seeing is how many records, on average, each group closes per day. So this is my 7-day sort of moving average of what the throughput is. And so you can see these are the different teams and the groups. And then I went out to Google and I just looked for a formula that made sense. So you can add formulas into these indicators. It's very, very simple to do. In this case, if I look at the details, everything in the bottom here is the formula, and everything that's a hyperlink is just a base indicator. So again, I'm going after that open incident indicator. If you look at this formula, it says give me the number of open incidents, weight it with the 7-day moving average, and then divide it by that average closed incidents per staff, again with that same weighted average. And it gives me a score, and in this case, the score is around 30 bodies. And then I take a really complex formula and I subtract those two out and I get 4.6. Right? But this organization, of course, didn't hire folks, and they were 100x this number. But what they were able to do is to move some of these people around temporarily to help them reduce some of the ticket load. And so not only does it show how many folks we would need to move, but it also shows where exactly we would put those folks. That's in the bottom right-hand corner. So this is a real example. It's a perfect use of performance analytics, and drop it right into the tool. Now, this isn't something they're going to look at every single day. It doesn't make sense. It's not what it's for. But what they will do is take this formula and then tweak it for next time, because they'll go through this upgrade process and they'll look at the volumes and they'll say, you know what, we did really well here. We really didn't need this many folks from this group, or we probably should have not touched those people at all. And then they'll build a new model. And so they can iterate through what makes sense for their environment. So this is just again, a great example of that. And one other one that I would show you is this. So this is, do some business service value. Sometimes customers ask me for things around production costs or for quality. So in this organization, they had a handful of apps, and these apps were very, very expensive to run. They also were very, very large revenue generating apps for them. So when these apps go down, it causes obviously a tremendous amount of pain. So what they wanted to do was to put a value for those outages. And so they were able to say, what does that application generate per hour in revenue? And they then were able to take the data inside of ServiceNow that says we're doing change requests. That we took this system down, planned or unplanned, for 8 minutes here, and we did 20 minutes here and 30 minutes here. Some of these were emergency changes. Sometimes they had unscheduled outages. But you're able to take that data and then collect it, put it into this type of gauge or this type of report. So again, another great use of performance analytics, a very, again, top-down approach to getting these. So we've talked about methodology, we've talked about some of the dashboards, I've shown you some of the visualizations. I want to show you this last component, maybe two here, but let's talk about this. This is the indicator itself. So this is the number of new incidents. This is the one that we looked at a bunch here. This is how the indicator looks inside of ServiceNow. And you can see it's got some data around when do you collect it, what is the direction, right? So do we want this number to be higher, to be lower? That's good for color coding. Things like, what is the unit of measurement? Is this a number? Is it an hour? Is it a date? What's the aggregate? Is it a count? What breakdowns are associated to this? And then once you have this, you notice here you have an indicator source. So we have taken the indicators and separated them from the indicator sources, because I don't necessarily know what each of your organizations, how you capture things like new records. Do you use the out-of-the-box fields? Do you use different fields? What about when you resolve tickets? So what we've done is separate these out so that you can then change the indicator source once and have it update everything else that's inside of the tool. So here's the source, and this is how you go after the data. In most BI tools, when you're building indicators, you're doing it via SQL. With ServiceNow, you're doing it via the condition builder. So you ServiceNow customers that are out there, you've been using the condition builder since you've had ServiceNow. It's how you build all of the reports, all of the list views, all of the queries. Everything works like this, and it's the exact same thing with PA. So in this case, I'm saying, how do I go after my new record? Well, I want everything that's opened on today. But again, these are all of the data fields that exist for example, the incident table. So I could do things like opened on today. You probably want to have and maybe opened on yesterday, for example. And then maybe you want to have things like and make sure, and maybe you use the resolved field. So you say anything where the resolved field maybe is not empty, for example. And then there's your catch-all. And you can go out here and you can say, show me what records this would have matched. I didn't open any records yesterday, but this could show you them. You could also select into it and go right to those records. So it's great as you're building this out. So these are for process users. These are for your regular folks that are building the report. If I own incident management or I own some other custom process, I know what my data fields are. So it's very easy for me to come in here and say, this is basically how it will work. I want this thing to run daily. Maybe it runs, it's a weekly, or maybe it's an end of the month report. So this is the indicator source. So again, using the condition builder for all of these, it's the same platform, it's the same logic that you are already using inside of the solution. You could have automated indicators, you could have formula indicators, I talked about that. A formula indicator just allows you to take other indicators and match them up. So for example, average age of open incidents or staff required for that 50% backlog. These are all examples of formulas. You guys can create these. You guys can pull down examples from other sources like Share, like Community Site. You can also pull them directly down from the KPI library. So if you want to go out to the KPI library and you find a couple that look interesting, you can bring those over as far as the metadata goes, start that process. Okay. We talked about some of the indicators. Let me show you one final thing, and then I'll turn it back over to Chris to talk about some of the methodology. Let's look at configuring the dashboards. So again, these are gauges just like everything else is inside of the solution. So if you want to mix and match or you want to create new things, you can do that. If you have rights to that, you can open these up. So for example, I have this open incident as a widget. And you notice it has 3 or 4 different types of indicators that are all showing at the same time. So you can mix and match. I could put problem information with change. You know, a very common one is show me the critical incident and overlay that with the number of emergency changes that failed within a 36-hour window. You know, those are two very different types of reports. You could put them together on one visual. So from here, I said this is a time series. And the time series just means I'm picking some date times slice. But I could, of course, pick different scores or lists or breakdowns. There are different visualizations for each of these types. And this, of course, gives me access to things like areas and steps and other stack charts. Not only can I pick the indicator, but I could also say this is the specific breakdown I want to see from that indicator. I could do things like change the colors. I could pick a certain date and time series. So if I wanted to pick an aggregate, I wanted to say, show me only the time series that matches the 7-day, for example, I could do that. And you could also then take other, again, indicators and drop them on the same box. So right now I have these three, but I could say, give me a new one. And this one maybe is something from problem management. So I could go out to the list and say, give me everything. Maybe the number of active projects I want to see. This is any of the data that you have. And then I could say I want that to be a line chart. I maybe want to change the color. I could add that to it. And that's it. You would update this one. Now we would see on our dashboard or my dashboard, not only that one, but also maybe the number of active projects. My number of active projects is actually very small. So if I was to pull some of these off, notice that the axes are all changing based on whatever data I had inside of the solution. So we've talked about the methodology for ServiceNow, our thoughts behind PA versus reporting. We talked about some of the main differentiators. We've also looked at the UI itself. We've talked about the dashboards. We talked about the indicators. We've talked about creating some of those. I've given you some real-world examples to get you thinking about what types of information we would put inside the PA. And then we've closed it out with some of the configuration itself. So we talked about adding new types of indicators with the sources. And we also talked about putting those indicators out onto the dashboard. At this point, I'm going to switch the con back to Chris at Fruition.
Great, thanks, Barry.
All right, so we're going to talk about how do we implement performance management or performance analytics. Barry did a little bit of the demo with the tool and how to do certain things, but how do you identify what you want to put into PA and when does it make sense to measure performance management? When we do implementations, the first thing we always do is identify the processes, the activities, and the domains of what needs to be managed, right? So we're going to say, we want to look at incident management trends, change management trends, open and close percentages, SLAs, that kind of thing. We need to identify that in the beginning so that we could make sure we know what data we need to collect. The second thing is we need to articulate the goals to be met. Why are we identifying these processes we want to implement PA on? This allows you to determine whether you want to track costs of your service desk and how they're doing, or your changes, or the efficiency of your actual staff. So those are some common things that we talk about when we talk about number 2 with the goals to be met. Define the metrics and indicators that measures if goals are being met, right? So that's going back to the KPI library. What KPIs do we need to measure to make sure that we accomplish number 2 and make sure those goals are there. The fourth is to collect the data for the indicators. So we run those data collections. We also determine how frequent we want those data to be collected. So that we can see our trends, we can see our thresholds, we can see our targets, and talk about over time how we meet number 2 and go from there. And then we determine if we've met our goals by the data collection and take improvement action. So that leads us into number 5. So we look at the data and we determine, where do we go from here? So this is the recommended implementation path that we use here at Fruition and ServiceNow to best use performance analytics within your organization. PA can be used in a number of different ways, but we think the most efficient way and best way to do is to be able to follow these 5 steps and kind of go from there. And it looks like, Mike, we have a poll. So Mike's going to start the poll here in a second.
Yep.
That will lead me into my next slide.
Great. Thanks, Chris. So our second and last poll for today's webinar, I just launched it. The question is, have you registered for the complimentary trial of performance analytics for incident management? And we'll get that out there. We'll give everybody about 10 seconds to vote here.
And while you all are voting, the next thing we're going to go into is the trial version, what you get, what you don't get, and how do you install it. It'll be a quick one slide kind of visualization as well as some background.
Great, thanks, Chris. So we'll close the poll in 3, 2, 1. So again, the poll question was, have you registered for the complimentary trial of performance analytics for incident management? And 14% of you said yes, 68% said no, and 18% said I don't know. And actually, I just shared the results with everybody, so you should see the pop-up on your screen. And worth noting that 70% of you voted, so thank you to those folks for participating. So I'll go ahead and hide those results, and then pass it back to Chris, and he'll close things off with this final slide.
All right, so how do we install performance analytics from a trial version standpoint? It's basically a plugin, just like any plugin in the system. You simply search for plugins and find performance analytics, install the data collector as well as the performance analytics plugin. It takes all of 5 to 10 minutes, and you can use the trial version. The trial version allows you to have 180 days of incident data. It is incident management only, and it's specific to that. Also, it gives you some out-of-box indicators to kind of play around with. You know you're on the trial version. If you look at the slide, you'll see the trial next to performance analytics on the application, as well as a get started kind of walkthrough of performance analytics. And I recommend this for anybody that has incident management. There is no harm in turning it on and allowing just the admins to use it. You can collect data from 180 days, kind of see the value. We at Fruition kind of are going to start turning this on for all our clients that we have currently, and then going forward, just so you guys can see it, if that client wants it, obviously. But once you decide that you do want performance analytics, then you will upgrade to the premium version, and you can contact Barry or Arjun if you have any questions about what the premium version entails. But it is available out there for free in a trial version basis for those that want to use it and kind of play around with it.
Great. Thanks, Chris, and thanks to you, Barry, as well. So this actually concludes the webinar for today, and it looks like we ended a little early. We still have a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and filter through the question box and present as many questions as we can to Barry and Chris to get answers to those. And again, like I said at the beginning, if we are unable to get to your question today, we will definitely be sure to follow up with you personally after today's webinar. So our first question is, what is the add-on licensing fee for the performance analytics capability? And Barry, I think that sounds like a question for you.
The premium PA is a flat percentage of ACV, so it's 20% of ACV, and that licenses it for the whole instance. Great.
Thanks, Barry. And Chris, I think you touched on this, but we did get a question from the audience from Rose Bateman. Thanks, Rose, for participating today. She asked, how long does the trial last? I think you said 180 days?
Well, the trial is there for as long as you want it, but it will only collect back historical data of 180 days. So if you install it and Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, you can have it for as long as you want it, and the trial version of it, but you can only collect 180 days worth of data.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Potentially another question for you, Barry. The documentation indicates that all KPIs are focused on service desk. Are there any for projects?
There are the out-of-the-box implementation, so what we call the quick start, does not have any focus specifically for project. But if you were to implement it, add an additional day onto the services, pick and choose a couple of others that you want to add into it. It's very easy to add those. Those also will probably be available going forward on the share or the community site. So as as we start to build these out and we add more and more content, all of that data will go out there so that everybody can use it and pull from it.
Great, thanks. And for the folks who are asking these questions, if you still have follow-up questions, contact us after the webinar for sure. Obviously, our contact info is up on the screen, so don't be hesitant to follow up. So it looks like we have time for just one more question. The question is, can I build dashboards on my HR app and other apps on the ServiceNow platform? If yes, can I personalize the dashboard so no IT people see the HR dashboard? So a lot there, Barry, but I think this one's for you again.
Yes, absolutely. So not only can you build a dashboard for just the HR application, but you can also have then those segregated dashboards so that just like the rest of the product, none of your IT folks can see those HR requests or HR dashboards.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll end there. I just want to say thanks to everybody for attending today's webinar. And obviously, thanks to Chris and Barry for sharing their knowledge and insight today with us. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, a recording and PDF of the deck will be shared with you sometime next week. If a question does come to mind after today, or you'd like another demo of performance analytics, or you need help implementing the free trial, feel free to reach out to either Fruition Partners or Barry. Both of our contact information is up on the screen. So take that down if you can, if you'd like. And again, like I said a couple times already, if you did ask a question today and we didn't get to it, we will definitely follow up with you afterwards. So that is it. I just want to say thanks again, and we hope to see you guys at the next webinar. Bye.